Hey everyone, welcome to Wishing Well BBQ. I'm Dustin Wells, and today I'm going to show you how to make smoked beef back ribs. Let's do it. If you've never had beef ribs, I'm telling you, you are totally missing out. Everybody loves to see those big dino ribs, the big short ribs, but that's not what we're doing today. Today we're doing beef back ribs. Very rarely do I find beef short ribs or plate ribs, which are those big dino ribs, in the grocery store, but I see these beef back ribs all the time, so I know that they're a little more accessible than those other ribs. And they're also significantly cheaper, so I know you're gonna wanna try these. Hey, I tell you what, I don't wanna wait any longer, so let me show you what we've gotta do to get these beef back ribs ready for the smoker. I have a rack of prime grade beef ribs, and these came from Porter & York. If you remember from my prime rib video, these back ribs were still kind of halfway connected, so I took my knife and I trimmed those off, and these are the beef ribs that I got from that. Alright, here's our prime grade beef back rib, and look at the marbling that we've got. If you look on this back side here, you can see that the bones are kind of like baby back ribs. They're on the bottom side here. Now on beef short ribs, the meat sits on top of the bone. So what we need to do is we need to make sure we take this membrane off, and we're just going to kind of square these ribs up. They're already not looking too bad. They're already pretty nicely shaped, so we don't have to really do too much. But if your back ribs have some kind of funky shape, go ahead and try to get those shaped nicely. I don't really have any extra fat on top of these ribs, so I don't have anything to trim. Maybe if I've got a piece hanging off, I need to take it off of there. Now we've got to take the membrane off of these ribs, and this isn't something you would do on beef short ribs, but it's definitely something you want to do on back ribs. I'm going to go ahead and slide a butter knife right under this membrane, and then I'm going to use a paper towel to pull all of that membrane off, and if you're lucky it'll come off in one strip, but mine didn't, so I had to do a little bit of extra work. Now that we've got the ribs all trimmed up, it's time to season, and the first thing we're going to do is use some yellow mustard as a binder. You can use whatever you'd like as a binder. You're not going to taste this in the end product. You can go ahead and flip these ribs over and put mustard on the other side as well. Now it's time to season, and you know I'm going to use my Wishing Well BBQ Texas Cowboy rub. I'm going to season on the bone side first, but I want to make sure I get a nice even distribution of seasoning, and hey, don't be shy. People always neglect that bone side, but if you think about it, that's really the first part of the rib that hits your tongue when you take a bite. So let's go ahead and top it off with a little bit of our competition style rub just to give it some extra color and flavor. Now I'm ready to flip these ribs over and do the same thing to the other side. We're going to start with that Texas Cowboy rub and then top it off with some competition style rub. And this is your presentation side, so make it look pretty. Now that I've got these ribs all nice and seasoned up, we are ready to put them on the smoker, so let's do it. Today I'm cooking on my Oklahoma Joe offset smoker, and I'm going to be using a combination of lump charcoal and hickory wood. I'm going to use my propane torch to get the fire started, and I want to bring this smoker up to 250 degrees. Once the pit is up to temperature, I'm going to put these beef ribs on the smoker and close it down and let it cook. Alright, we've had these beef ribs on for about 3 hours, and just check it out. These have some really awesome color to them. The bark is definitely starting to set, which is nice because I don't have a lot coming off of my fingers. But honestly, I still want a little bit more color, so I'm going to let it keep on going. I'm just going to use my ThermoPro here to see what the temperature is, and it looks like we're at about 145 degrees. Let's go ahead and close down the smoker, and we'll come back and check on it in about an hour. Alright, it's been an additional hour for a total of 4 hours, and just check these ribs out. We've got some pullback happening on those bones, and that's one thing I'm looking for. And the color and the bark on this is perfect. The ribs are reading right at about 155 degrees. I'd say that we're ready to wrap these ribs up, so let's do it. When wrapping these ribs, you could wrap them however you like. You could use butcher paper like I'm going to use today, or you could use foil. To start this off, I've got some homemade beef tallow, and if you don't have any of this, you can definitely use butter, and if you'll check out the video in the description, I'll show you how to make beef tallow. I'm going to take some of this tallow and I'm just going to pour some of it right onto the butcher paper. I'm gonna rub this tallow into the paper and then place my ribs meat side down. Then I'm just gonna put a little bit more tallow on the back side of that bone, and then we're ready to wrap these ribs up. Butcher paper is definitely my preferred method when wrapping beef ribs because it's a little bit more breathable than foil, so it's gonna let some of that steam escape, and that's gonna preserve your bark. Now that we've got these beef ribs nice and wrapped up, we're gonna put them back on the smoker, and now we're gonna crank the temperature up to about 300 degrees. All right, we have checked on these ribs every hour, and at this point it's been on for 4.5 hours, and I've been feeling around on them, and I know that they are done. Let's go ahead and take these off of the pit. Now there's a couple of reasons why I know that these ribs are done. I can feel them and pick them up and just tell that they are super tender. Let's unwrap them and see what we've got. You can see this butcher paper is nice and soaked in rendered beef fat, so you know this is going to be so good. Oh man, that looks amazing. Come on, you cannot tell me that those do not look so awesome. I'm not really just going for a temperature here, I'm really going for a feel, and I can tell you that these are probing like butter. You see a lot of drawback on these bones, so that's something else I'm looking for. If I pick them up, they're just super, super tender. They almost want to fall apart, but they still hold together just a little bit. Now we've got to do one of the most important parts. We've got to let these beef ribs rest. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap them back up. I'm going to flip them over. And I'm just going to sit here and let these rest. If you want to rest them in a cooler for a couple of hours, you can definitely do that. The longer you rest these ribs, the better they're going to be. If you need to do a quick rest, you can just let them kind of hang out here wrapped up and let them cool off for about 30-40 minutes, and then they'll be ready to slice. Let's let these beef ribs rest and we'll come right back to you. We have let these beef ribs rest for about 45 minutes, and I tell you what, I cannot wait any longer to slice into these ribs. Hey, but before we do, let's talk about what we did to get here. The first thing I did was make sure the ribs were nice and squared up and took off any extra fat that I didn't want on there. Then I removed the membrane using a butter knife and a paper towel, and I rubbed both sides down with some yellow mustard. Then I heavily seasoned the ribs with my Wishing Well BBQ Texas Cowboy rub and my competition style rub. And we put them on the Oklahoma Joe offset at 250 degrees for 4 hours. We took them out of the smoker and covered them in some homemade beef tallow, and we wrapped them up in some butcher paper. Then we put it back on the smoker at 300 degrees for 4.5 hours. We took them off of the smoker and let them rest for 45 minutes, and now here we are, and I tell you what, let's slice into these. Oh yes. Tell me that right there is not a beautiful sight. I'm gonna use my Spaceman slicer knife here, and I'm just gonna go right in between the bones. On these back ribs here, there's a little bone up top that I didn't remove, but it's okay, it totally pulls right out. Kinda goes at an angle. Oh man. Look at that. Beautiful slice. Slices like butter. Let's pull out one of these ribs here. Oh, that is super juicy. Does it really get much better than that? I don't think so. Hey, I tell you what, I'm so ready to take a bite. That is a beefy rib. Hey, cheers to you. Cheers to a good cook. Let's take a bite. Look at that bite through. That's how you know it's perfect. It has just a touch of pull. It's not just completely falling off the bone, but it's definitely bite through. Whew. The Texas Cowboy rub and the competition style rub is definitely a win on these beef ribs. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. I'm telling you, you've got to try this recipe. It is phenomenal. Thank you so much much for checking out today's video. If you like what we're doing here on the Wishing Well BBQ channel, make sure you click that subscribe button below so that you don't miss out on any of the fun. Make sure you also check out all of our other socials, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and check out all of the affiliate links we have below. Thank you so much again for watching, and as always, we'll see you next time.